All right, how's it going, everyone? New episode of the Music Reviewer Pod today. My name's Josh. Thanks for tuning in, and welcome. I know this is, like I promised, the last episode of the year. A new episode of Talking Tracks, episode 7. And I'm glad that everyone's tuning in. Hope everyone had a nice December. Hopefully the holidays weren't too bad for anyone. If you got some time to relax, good. I know I did a little bit. Anyways, we're just doing this last year-end episode that will kind of tie up best and worst track of the week for the rest of the year, to kind of just like talk about the end of the year and the state of like that part of the segment. Not going to touch on any December best and worst track of the week just because the Billboard year technically ends on the last week of November, so that's when they release their end year list. We'll talk a little bit about that. But other than that, we just have 10 talks to talk about that I thought are interesting. And then we got a lot of best and worst track of the week as well. Pretty much covering the whole entire week of November that we missed when I took a brief hiatus for about a little bit over a month. With that being said, if you're joining back after all that, thank you, welcome. Hope you caught the episode where I kind of just explained a few things about the podcast and why I took a bit of a break that dropped on December 12th. It's literally the episode right before the one you're listening to now. So cool episode, best and worst track of the week. A decent amount of reception. A lot of people have listened to it, as opposed to other best and worst track of the weeks I've done before. Most of them on YouTube, but I think it's best just to put them on the actual podcast going forward. But anyways, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate anyone that listens. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into Talking Tracks episode 7. All right, so first track I wanted to cover was by the band Wet Leg, Too Late Now. This is one of those kind of funky, quirky UK bands that I guess pops up every year or so that gets a lot of attention, especially like in the indie sort of scene, indie blogosphere. It seems like it was Wet Leg towards like I guess the mid to latter part of the year. There's a bit of buzz. They released an album, which I have not listened to fully, but there have been some tracks that I caught just by generally listening to music here and there and catching it on like an XMU or Spotify playlist. So yeah, pretty interesting band. The title of the track that I wanted to talk about is Too Late Now. It's their latest one. I was a bit meh on it. It kind of opens up with a slow Kings of Leon like build up in the intro, with a lot of 2010s alt rock flavor, some thin drum textures driving the track. But it later does go into a nice, energetic driving section that I kind of caught on is kind of like what the band likes to focus on and on quite a few of their tracks. But the track overall is pretty stagnant, not very gritty like other Wet Leg tracks I've heard. So if you're interested, check that track out by Wet Leg. Next track is going to be by Animal Collective, titled Walker. This track is the second of the, I guess, 2 singles that they've released already for their upcoming album. I think releasing sometime in 2022. Prester John was the first one. I was really digging that one. Pretty cool. I wasn't expecting to get some new Animal Collective, especially in the latter part of this year. But they're a band I haven't really talked much about. This track in general, I wanted to like it a bit more. It's quite stagnant as well. Not as enjoyable as Prester John, in my opinion. And it's just quite standard psychedelic music for Animal Collective. It's their bread and butter. But on the other hand, it sounds a bit like it could have been like an Alt-J inspired track for some reason, minus the vocal style. But it is a bit more playful and jumpier than Prester John. But that's kind of pretty much the track has going for it. After that is Hippo Campus, the band Hippo Campus with Semi-Pro. This is a band I've listened to very casually for the past few years. I kind of was wanting to hear something different from this band at this point in their career. The production has definitely gotten quite glossier and pristine There's a nice, bright acoustic guitar that structures the track, but it kind of just sounds like teen pop from like the 2000s. That's meant for like a high school drama based movie that kind of opens up the movie for some reason. It sounds like the latest Pale Waves album, if that kind of paints a better picture. Not a fan of some of the higher pitched falsetto vocals. The bass and drums sometimes line up awkwardly. I'm not sure if they're just trying to be a bit more technical. Didn't really enjoy that track as much as other Hippo Campus tracks. Next one is Knuckle Puck with the band Knuckle Puck with Levitate. This track has a refreshing 2010s pop punk aesthetic, as you'd expect from Knuckle Puck, because they are from that era of pop punk, driven by some crunchy guitar riffs, punchy bass lines that cut through the entire track. The chorus is grounded in a nice steadiness that helps the band sound tight with a big sound. It's a pretty straightforward pop punk cut, though. Not bad. Next one is next track is Faultline by Girlpool. This is a band I really not have been too interested in since they came out like sometime in like 2015 or 2014. I really did not like one of their albums. I think it was their sophomore album. It was a bit overhyped. They kind of ditched that style, that sort of I don't even know how to sign it, like bedroom singer-songwriter, two people harmonizing over a basic riff, not to demean like their music, but they really did not develop past that for like the beginning of their career. They've kind of ditched that, and it's kind of good to hear something different. They subbed out those signature high-pitched vocals for a dreamier and breathier style. I'm digging the Chris accompanying drum track on this track. Overall, the track is a bit sleepy, maybe a bit too sleepy. I was kind of waiting for a build-up. And production-wise, some of the lighter synths are a bit too buried. They might as well not be there. It's an interesting track overall. Next one is Baldur's Gate by Shame. I believe we covered Drunk Tank Pink, the latest Shame album, and I love that album. One of my favorite albums that I've covered on this podcast. If you haven't heard that album, check it out. They're back, kind of like a different sort of style here, with more of an organic sound, almost spoken word like vocals. Love the synth melody that ends up coloring up the track as it comes in at some point in the first verse. It works well, some fat and boomy bass that warms up the track. Lovely harmonies in the outro as well. It's a good cut. Next track is by American Football with the track Rare Symmetry. I don't know if this is a lead single to like a new project, but really digging this. This is probably my favorite track out of all the ones on Talking Tracks this week. Kind of opens up with a nice sparkling intro with light guitar textures, varying time signatures, very much still implemented, very much grounded still in the Midwest emo stylization. The reiteration of the opening groove every time it's presented in the track is lovely. It's a track that should be typical of this type of this band overall, with a huge instrumental interlude, explosions in the sky, like maybe. It's a good track. After that, we have 25 Million by Roddy Ricch. Don't know what to think of this. The rapping sounds a bit like Polo G. And I think I like Roddy Ricch when he's more centered around his vocals. It kind of just sounds like mid-tier rapping, I guess, when that's happening on this track, and he's mainly rapping on this track. Interesting flow all throughout, though. There's some bright synths that come in and out of the track. And I dig that there's no feature. I like that he carried the track all throughout. The beat is a tad generic, though, in the context of like the trap game. That's not really saying much, but there you go. Interesting track by Roddy Ricch. After that, we have Go to Hell by Clinton Kane. This is an artist that I wouldn't really be particularly interested in listening to. He kind of just sounds like a relic of the 2010s, early 2010s singer-songwriter Phillips sort of deal that later developed to like a Louis Capaldi sort of thing with like a few artists mixed in between then and now. He's kind of like holding that style and just kind of like maybe trying to carry the torch. I think he's just one breakout hit away. I don't think this is that track. And also, he has a distinct vocal style to him. I'm not sure who he sounds like, but it's really bothering me. I can't put my finger on it. This is more of like a heavier track too. It has a bit more of like a rock drive to it, especially on the chorus. A lot of charisma on his vocals. The guitars are a bit washed out though. It's an interesting track. I think I liked it better than that Chicken Tendy song that I discovered him with not the other day, I guess a few months ago on Best and Worst Track of the Week that somehow entered to the Hot 100. Slave Shall Serve by Behemoth is the last track we'll talk about. I kind of just threw this on here. Since it's the end of the year, there's really not much being released that's like that recent. I saw Behemoth release an album I think this past month. I guess European death metal satanic-ish band. It's some really dirty death metal on this track. Aggressive and annihilating drumming. Some interesting melodic guitar lines when they're thrown in. I can maybe do without the breakdown. It doesn't really serve the song all that well, but it's a pretty punishing sound all throughout. It's ugly and disgusting sounding as it should sound. And this is just a very heavy, aggressive, unforgiving track by this interesting act, Behemoth, that I guess is a bit divisive in the metal world. I don't know. If you like metal, give them a shot. You probably already heard of them if you're a metalhead, though. Alright. And as promised, the conclusion of Best and Worst Track of the Week for 2021. The show has evolved quite a bit. And, this is pretty much just me talking about how the year ended. And some thoughts on the month of November. So if you're new to the podcast, if this is like one of your first times hearing me talk, Best and Worst Track of the Week was like a weekly segment, our weekly episode that I did on the podcast for about a year, I think, where I literally just take all new entries into the Hot 100 for that given week and just take one that's the worst, take one that's the best. I used to talk about every single track that entered, but with the current state of the Billboard Hot 100, it's really easy for mid-tier rap to come in quite frequently and album bombs that are like 20 songs long to just dominate a week and they're gone the next week. So what I'm basically trying to say is that some of the music that I was covering isn't all that consequential and very good. It just got a bit taxing, but nonetheless, I just talk about the best and worst track now. When I do talking tracks, not to bore anyone, but anyways, yeah, that's how it goes down. Year-end list on this episode. Some notes I'm going to talk about. There really wasn't anything that was all that surprising. You know, if you kept up with the Hot 100 and looked at it, other than like Rocking Around the Christmas Tree being 92. Holy by Justin Bieber and Chance the Rapper. It feels like that track is already years old, but it's still less around a year old, and it made 35 for the year of 2021. Levitating, number 1 by Dua Lipa, the number 1 track in the country for the year of 2021. I guess it was, it stuck around the top long enough for it to do that. Of course, Good For You by Olivia Rodrigo, enough steam to be at number 5. A surprise that I saw for me was Todo De Ti by Raul Alejandro. Probably one of my favorite best tracks of the week for the year of 2021. It managed to squeeze in at 100, so good for him on that. I think All I Want for Christmas Is You is another Christmas track that ended up making the list. That's not surprising, but Rocking Around the Christmas Tree kind of is. Nothing else. You can take a look at it. It's on Billboard.com. All right, but without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the last segment of Best and Worst Track of the Week for the year of 2021. Let's go. This is, of course, taking into consideration Billboard's year-end list. So this is basically the month of November. For the week of November 6th, we had some tracks here and there that I thought were cool. To Be Loved by You by Parker McCollum is a new track that was okay by him. A new track by Lisa, I guess the K-pop artist that I think is part of a really big K-pop group that's gone single. I'm not a fan of her stuff so far. A collab track with Walla and J. Cole. Lotto, who I think is just like a Megan Thee Stallion / Cardi B copycat. Lil TJ and Fabio Foreign. I thought that track was a bit better than I thought it would be, but anyways. And then also there's a collab track, really random, Swedish House Mafia, coming out of like hiatus-ish, and The Weeknd. Thought the track could have been a little bit better, honestly. But yeah, let's go ahead and start with worst track of the week, because we always want to end on a positive note. So for the week of November 6th, worst track of the week was Let's Go Brandon, Tyson James, Chandler, Chump, and Bryson Gray. Honestly, these must be below D-list rappers. I've never really heard of them, and this is my first time. And the fact that the track that I'm being introduced to them with is a parody, kind of like a novelty track with Let's Go Brandon. Trying to just piggyback on this pop culture meme / I don't know what to call it, conservative crown jewel. They just love saying Let's Go Brandon. And not politics aside, this is just a bad track, filled with predictable talking points, pretty shitty Casio quality beat. The hook seems to think it more highly of itself than it really is, because it's probably thrown in about 4 times in the track, and all it really manages to do is use Let's Go Brandon over and over again. There's an off-brand Slim Shady type rapper, I think that comes in second in terms of verses, and then the last rapper sounds quite Bush League, possibly like to the point where I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of their first tracks that they've ever been on. One of the worst tracks I've heard this year. Not very good songwriting or rapping chops at pretty much any point of the track. On the upside, there was a decent hip-hop track this week. Got best track of the week, Switches and Dracs featuring Polo G, SG by Moneybagg Yo. Typically, I'm not a huge fan of Moneybagg Yo, but he raps with a decent flow over the beat. He sounds menacing. He has a decent presence. The hook is done well by Polo G. He shows charisma and grit. Dark mood over the track. That's just kind of consistent. It was just the most consistent and decent track of this week. Most of the hip-hop was subpar. SG, another rapper that's kind of up and coming, that's kind of just hopping on these melodic, minor key, piano instrumental type rap. His feature isn't bad. So yeah, best track of the week goes to Switches and Dracs by Moneybagg Yo. All right, next week. This was a fun week, actually. For the week of November 13th. This was... this was a Halloween week. So yeah, in the middle of November, the Halloween music, because I guess the way everything lines up with Billboard, charted. I didn't think this was a thing, but I don't remember that happening last year. I might have just forgotten. So yeah, there were some fun tracks. Ghostbusters by Ray Parker Jr., classic. Monster Mash, the classic Halloween track. An Ed Sheeran track, a Megan Thee Stallion track. I've already forgot how it sounds like. A pretty good track by Lil Uzi Vert. I want to give that an honorable mention with Demon High. I almost gave that best track of the week. But anyways, worst track of the week was Ghost Town by Benson Boone. Nothing too terrible about this track. It kind of just lost by default. It goes along with the cliche sad piano ballad that periodically enters the Hot 100. It sounds interesting with like this boomy sub bass that coats the track. It's a bit heavier than you think a track like this is, because it kind of follows like the sad ballad Louis Capaldi type deal. The track overall is a bit bare with some light percussive textures that kind of don't really belong there. Nice vocals for most of the track. It's sung beautifully, but it just kind of didn't really do much for me. And really cool track. This isn't a new track at all. They got best track of the week this week. It's a classic Honestly, I never really knew who the artist is. I always assumed like Aunt Michael Jackson was singing the hook or something like that. Somebody's Watching Me by Rockwell. If you've heard this track, you know what I'm talking about. Godly synth line that just kind of goes all throughout the track, kind of like an ostinato thing going. I love the bounce in the drum track. Love the talk box that kind of just is thrown in like in the introduction and various points of the track. Like I said, I thought like MJ or maybe like Boy George or some shit like that from the 80s was on here. But anyways, great track by Rockwell. I always feel like somebody's watching me. I never really thought of this as a Halloween track, but nonetheless, great track. All right, for November 20th, this was an annoying week. One of those weeks where I'm a bit glad that I stopped doing best and worst track of the week on a weekly basis. There was a Summer Walker album bomb. Literally everything on this album by Summer Walker, other than sounding very similar track to track and having an unusual, unnecessary amount of features and sounding like SZA, I will say Summer Walker might be a little bit better than SZA. I don't know, but I don't know. I like SZA as well, but I do not listen to these artists regularly to have quite much of an opinion. Other than Summer Walker's latest album is quite mid. I struggled to get through most tracks. Not that they were bad, they were just painfully mid. With that being said, worst track of the week, Super Gremlin by Kodak Black. Worst track of the week. Probably one of the worst hip-hop tracks I've heard in the past few months. I hate the pitched up sample with the Chipmunk Youth Choir like vocals that are just hammered on every chorus. Kodak's execution is sloppy for most of the track. He doesn't really clearly execute any of his lines. He kind of slurs his words, not all that surprising. The instrumental is quite run-of-the-mill, and Kodak's vocals are quite underwhelming, and he sounds bored on a lot of the track. Uninspiring to say the least. Best track of the week. One of the things I liked, I guess, about this week, I guess there was some Silk Sonic stuff, even though the next week was technically their album bomb. Smokin' Out the Window, I think I like this maybe a little bit more than Leave the Door Open. We'll see. Best track of the week by default. Smooth R&B track. Love the fat groovy bass line supporting the track. The light neck picking funky guitar. It's kind of just all over the place. Love the lyrical content. Kind of just Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak reminiscing about a relationship that was going well and suddenly it's gone. Anderson sounds great here as well. He demonstrates that he can keep up with Bruno on here. Love the crisp drum track. The rich harmonies of various arrivals on the track. Just great track overall. Alright, so finally last week of 2021. November 27th, best and worst track of the week. I actually literally had to go and listen to a few more tracks because this was a long week. Taylor Swift album bomb, Taylor's version dropped for that week with her remakes of Red, and then also the Silk Sonic album bomb. 2 album bombs for the last week is pretty ridiculous. And then also a Juice WRLD track already, kind of foretelling what is going to happen in December, because for some reason right before the end of 2021 they had to do another posthumous Juice WRLD album. That's what everyone needed. I don't know what to think about that, honestly. There's a Luke Combs track in here that I thought was okay. But I will say I'm satisfied with this week compared to the others. There's a lot more quality overall. But probably the most surprising thing was really the best track, which I'll get to in a sec. But worst track, kind of not a terrible track. It's kind of one of the tracks I think is gaining traction from this Red remake deal. Message in a Bottle. Taylor's vocals here in the chorus sound quite muffled or manipulated. I don't know what it is. Maybe they're just compressed. The chorus is quite unsteady and awkward songwriting wise. The bubblegum pop charm that Taylor usually kind of does well and and makes her music kind of good. Doesn't work here. The drum machine sounds flat. The bridge material is probably the most interesting section of the track, honestly. And it doesn't really last all that long either. So, not the worst track I've heard, trust me, from, the month of November. But worst track goes to Taylor Swift with Message in a Bottle, Taylor's version. Best track of the week, though, I don't know what compelled these two to get together and drop a track before the end of the year, but La Farma by Rosalia and The Weeknd. I'm surprised this track isn't a bit bigger. I don't know, maybe if it's making rounds on Latin radio, but this is a great track. I would never have thought The Weeknd would go on a bachata-style track, collabing with someone and sounding this decent, and he does quite well, and Rosalia does well in this bachata style as well. Her talent is really off the charts with what she's able to do pop wise, flamenco style, really wherever you want to put her on a hip-hop track, whatever. And I love that The Weeknd chose to sing in Spanish here. He kind of goes for like higher pitch, almost Romeo Santos like style in the vocals. He seems like he has potential to do well in this realm if he wanted to. Rosalia sounds, naturally quite good. Her light vocal tone kind of flutters over the bachata instrumental quite naturally, along with like the synths that are thrown in that color the track. This is just quite a good track front to back. One of my one of my favorite tracks from this year, honestly. I thought it was nice. So. Yeah, Rosalia, I think she did that one track she did with Billie Eilish was good too. So I'm thinking about it. But anyways, that concludes the last episode of the pod for this year. And thanks for tuning in. I hope to do more stuff in the future. We'll see. But anyways, hopefully 2021 will come soon with an album I want to review too. So we'll get to that. Anyways, have a safe new year. My name's Josh. I'm a music reviewer. Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe on your preferred listening service on whatever you use. But anyways, see you later.